Welcome to Researcher's Desk. It is a super pleasure to welcome Leyla De Amicis from, sorry Leyla if I messed up your name,
Don't worry.
at the University of Glasgow. And I could use lots of excuses, but Leyla's in Glasgow and I'm from Scotland, so I should be able to say her name. Lila's going to be talking with us about how psychology can help us with environmental sustainability and biodiversity. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lila through the European Civic University Alliance, of which both Glasgow and Stockholm are partners. And I've actually heard Lila before, and I know this is going to be a fantastic talk. So I'm very much looking forward to listening again. Lila, while you're actually speaking, I'll be turning my own camera off so we get really good bandwidth. And but I will be in the background, and any technical issues, I will suddenly appear. Lila, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us at Researcher's Desk today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody to this presentation. I'm honored to have this large public actually. And so my name is Leyla De Amicis, and I work in Glasgow at University of Glasgow, but I'm actually originally Italian, so as you can might hear from my accent. And I teach on some MSc courses on psychology, and especially one is called psychological studies. And I have developed this course on psychology or environmental sustainability last year. And because of the importance that psychology can have on environmental sustainability and biodiversity. So this is why I'm actually going to talk about this to you today. So, as you know, climate change is a huge threat for all of us as humans, but also not humans, only humans, also non-humans, animals, and all our planets. This has been highlighted for some time now. So here we have like some results, some findings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, warning us about our behavior as humans, the threats that we have on our planet in terms of heat waves, heavy downpours, flooding, droughts, and biological loss. So what are we supposed to do with this? So we are asked because of our emotion that we have with combustion of fossil fuels or greenhouse gases. We are supposed to limit our temperature in the planet from down to 2 centigrades, centigrades grades. So because all of this and deforestation and even livestock farming have a huge impact on global warming, really. So we also understood now that we are posing as humans a threat to our biosphere. So you can see from these pictures, we have a very limited amount of living biomass given by all the wildlife around the world, but the human-made mass is actually quite massive. For example, if we consider plastic, and also when we consider like a natural environment and the buildings and infrastructures, you can also see how much space we are occupying in the world and how much this is going to affect our planet. And here there is a quite interesting some interesting information about different wildlife animals and the threats that we can pose on them. Obviously, we know we have a massive amount of farming animals, but the wildlife is quite endangered. And here you can see what causes problems of different species from something that we would never think about. But you can see like here, like hundreds of millions of migratory birds are killed by human-made glass structures, or there are different threats also to insects. So actually we know now that about the 40% of insect species are declining and at risk of extinction, double the rate for vertebrate, and so on. So we are affecting all our companions around the world. So we know that we have a huge responsibility on all of this as humans, because the main problem is that we are consuming a lot of resources and too quickly. So even if people are now aware of this, before we could have the excuse that we didn't know about this, but now this information is quite spread. So what doesn't make us act accordingly to this? And this is where psychology can be very helpful, but not only here, but this is a main point that psychology can help. So first of all, we can understand, we can explore if this problem that is linked to our action or inaction is linked to a sort of evolutionary based behavior. So there is some truth about this actually. So for example, we are more prone to solve problems late and when they are catastrophic. So also we are very driven to have a pleasure and accumulating behavior. And also we have a lot of social pressure and comparison that make us like more driven to focus on pleasuring habits and consuming quite a lot. So we also put a lot of trust on being able to build fantastic technologies that of course can be helpful, but at the same time it seems like it will not be enough to save us if we continue with this pace of consumerism and not caring about the planet. Because we are basically going to extinct ourselves and also the other species on our planet. So what we seem to have forgotten, and this is something that is more related possibly to a sort of Western-oriented attitudes and globalization that affect all different cultures around the world, most of them at least. We have forgotten that actually life is all interdependent. So also small actions can actually have little consequences. So if we go to pollute a little part of a river, where the consequences afterwards in everything. If we change policies about fishing on a specific species, how that is going to impact other species. So a lot of times we are working around this as well, without considering what could be actually the wider consequences afterwards. So the life system is circular, so we think of things are going in a linear way. Actually, we have to think more in a cycling way about what we consume on the planet. And this is actually what our ancestors used to do. I suppose we can are safe to say that it's especially from last centuries that things started to get very dramatically wrong. So we need to be aware that there are limits to growth. Diversity is very important and help us with resilience. And we need to work on around solutions that they are more upstream rather than downstream. So not solve the problems when they've already happened, but try to go to the origins and the roots of the problem. So there's been a lot of actions that have been suggested to limit our negative impact, if we want, to cause climate change, the climate change threat. So, for example, use of low carbon energy sources and carriers, adapt energy efficient appliances and systems, implement home insulations, engage in energy saving behavior. So here you can see like a list, but all these actions have actually also different impact. So, and they are also taken account by people in different ways. And sometimes it's actually also our responsibility as researchers to push on what is very meaningful rather than things that and actions that are not really that impactful. So there is a lot of pressure on recycling that can be useful, but actually one of the main things that we could do is actually changing our diet. So at least reduce the amount of meat, if not going completely meat-free. But this is, of course, something that people don't like much. It's a very hot topic. But I mean, there are like some changes, positive changes in this direction. But as we will see, sometimes we have like maybe support from the individuals, less from the systemic situation. So we need also to change everything in order to have a strong impact on what we are doing. So we talk a lot about the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals. So of course, also the UN is quite aware of dangers of climate change and encourage to focus on different goals in order to be able to live a planet that is sustainable and livable for the future generations. So if you go on the website, there is a lot of information about all different actions that can be taken. And here there is like a warning about how people could be lazy. So how we can actually make people from lazy to active citizens. But again, you can see also here, maybe sometimes the encouragements are not like about very important actions that people can take, but everything can matter though. But we are at the stage in which now we are talking about adaptation actions, unfortunately. It's not about just mitigating climate change, but we need to understand how to react whenever we are facing the climate change challenge. So what about taking preparation actions? So we need to implement and start using emergency kits and so on. So pursuing insurance. At the moment, we don't hear much about this, but this is something that is growing, helping people to evacuate. And of course, we will have to have like more supporting policies and system change for reducing climate change and the negative impacts. So far, we seems to be a little bit still far from it. So why psychology is important? I already mentioned a little bit about this, but psychology is what's happening in our head. In general terms, we say that psychology is the study of the mind and behavior. That is something, it's a very generic and can be useful definition, but I don't like that there isn't any reference, for example, to the common good, because psychology, as many other disciplines, has been responsible of a lot of systematic racism and challenge to the planet, considering itself like amoral, unethical, like not considering the ethicality of things that they're going to study. Instead, it's quite important that we focus on what matters and what can help us as humans on the planet and non-human animals as well. So it's important to point out that psychology has a responsibility to make ethical choices, and also the study of the mind and behavior should actually be focused on the common good. So, but anyways, what characterizes psychology is also a sound scientific methodology, and there are different things that we consider in terms of mind, so we can study social cognitive emotional processes, personal needs and values, motives, learning, and we should focus on real world issues. It's not always the case. There are people, psychologists that are less applied than others, but still, it's quite important to focus on being ethical. So what different psychologists can focus on is trying to understand the social and psychological causes of human activities to support and enhance sustainability, or try at least to limit the adaptability that we can have on the planet. So we should look at trying to understand the human activities that are at the source, at the root of sustainability problems. So there are a lot of gaps at the moment to try to understand how human activities are responsible for sustainability concerns. And we need to do this very urgently because we really have not that much time, and without having like some ethical shortcuts, but trying to have as much as possible the collaboration of communities as well to try to understand these issues as much as possible. So actually the relationship between psychology and environmental sustainability is not quite new. I mean, there are some bits of interest towards environmental from psychologists starting from the 70s, even if the focus was more about how people live in different environments, how you adapt, focus on buildings, perception, and so on. So it was much more like broader. And then in the 90s, we started to focus on eco-psychology, that it was more something like psychology, but as emphasized the importance of a sort of harmonious coexistence between humans and the planets. And now, from this century, the current century, we started to focus on conservation psychology, looking at more like what are the problems here, what we can do that can help us, that is good for human health and well-being, but also to our planet, because the two things are actually going together. So there are different areas of psychology. So every psychologist, some people can be actually working across the different areas, but some psychologists can be more focused on cognitive psychology, so investigating more how we can change beliefs, bias. Developmental psychologists are more focused on different age groups, mostly children, but we are looking at adolescents, also elderly people. So different age groups over the lifespan, how different habits or changes in behavior can be important and done. We have also psychology of individual differences, so we are quite aware that people are very different, so how different messages can be more suitable for some people rather than others. And of course, we know that the media have a huge impact on how people behave, so we have to focus on this as well. We can focus on the social and the organizational systems. We know that people can influence others, and we are also quite influenced by others. And we know that climate change is affecting us from the physical point of view and mental health point of view. So, of course, we have to have on board also psychologists that focus on counseling and clinical and health psychology. So here is just like to give you an overview and more in-depth examples, for example. So, for example, cognitive psychologists, we focus on our biased thinking. So people sometimes look at they infer specific information from looking around them, or we have also stereotypes. Unfortunately, at the moment, environmentalists are not seen that well, especially when we know we are also in prison sometimes if we go protesting. So, but there are different strategies. So these biases help us also to focus on important strategies that we can implement. So for example, people have like this sort of loss aversion. So if one of successful strategies was increasing of 5 cents bags in the store, and because of this perceived loss of money, people started, of course, to not buy, or at least buy as less as possible bags in the store, and take with them some bags. So that of course has helped to decrease the amount of plastic to some extent. And we also have this kind of important bias. We always think we are better than others. And we have optimistic bias, think that we are less, more immune actually than others to negative events. So negative events do not occur to us, but to actually our other people. Oh, I hope this is not going on. But this is actually an interesting case of focusing on biodiversity that helped quite a lot. There was this video going viral. I don't know if some of you remember this. There was this researcher in Costa Rica that published this video online showing like turtles could be impact of from a plastic drinking straw. And from this case, actually, a lot of policies started to be implemented across the world to have like, less, you can watch the video by yourself, otherwise we will take too long. But it was quite impressive to see how that video was so impactful, actually. And that was for different reasons. It was because it really attract attention, raise emotions, very strong emotions, allow about sense of pity towards the turtle, but also provided a sort of a suggestion for action that sometimes we struggle to think about what can we actually do. So yeah, we talk a lot about eco psychology again. That means like we need to protect our planet because we benefit from that. We need a nice environment. That's so important for us and in terms of physical health and mental health point of view. So here, for example, is like highlighting some benefits of contact with nature. It helps us to recover from stress, just looking at the natural landscape. It's the pleasure of looking at something nice that can release our negative emotions, but also can help us to focus, for example. We have found that being in a natural environment afterwards helps to capture our attention and increase it, reducing concentration, decreasing mental fatigue. So this is why now we are, as a psychologist, also explore more different types of nature therapies. So we have animal-assisted therapies, horticulture therapies, foster therapy. So all kind of therapies that actually help us to connect with nature. But yes, sometimes we also, in this case, need to take in account some ethical issues. So, for example, if we have like a forest therapy, we need to understand how this is going to impact. So here is just like very briefly to show that there are some climate cafe that they are not necessarily run by psychologists, but they are all around the world at the moment that support people that have like anxiety and depression linked to climate change worries. Everyone can go really. You can look online and you probably will find around your areas, but also online. There are these groups in which people just come together and can share their worries, anger, every negative feeling about climate change, but afterwards, because of sharing, it seems like people are feeling much better and more reassured that at least there are other people perceiving and feeling the same. So that's probably what is actually very important to support the people in these circles. So this is also to emphasize the importance that the nature have across all our lifespan, starting from, of course, like children. We really benefit from being in contact with nature, and we have like these issues that a lot of children nowadays are more indoor children, and there is this, it's not really like a diagnosis, a diagnosed disorder, but we talk more and more about nature deficit disorder that kind of alienate children a little bit from the importance of nature. But actually, children are very, can benefit quite a lot from nature, from all different point of view, from their cognitive development, social behaviorment, physical health behavior development. So we talk about folk biologies. So children have also their own specific understanding of the natural world, but culture also make quite a lot of difference. So of course here there are some examples from children that come from some indigenous populations that have like a much more understanding of nature compared with children that are actually growing in cities. And this is actually something quite important that nowadays, because of us living in cities, are more and more alienated from nature, we are starting to developing an environmental generational amnesia. So people that have never experienced so much contact with nature, they end up to not really caring much about nature. They are not knowing what they are missing out. And because of that, they might be not much interested in preserving the natural environment and caring about biodiversity loss. So how can we increase climate change action? So there are different ways we can work on, first of all, like changing specific beliefs. We have seen like biases, working on values. And sometimes people do things right. So we need actually to emphasize what they've done right before don't just replacing things with something old with something new. So it's very important to also consider social costs and benefits, trying to understand what people are worried about, and increase the awareness of climate impact of actions. So there are some that are more important than others. and also working on high behavioral cost due to structural factors. So it's not all down to the individuals, but we need to consider, of course, like the importance of our policies, our governments in all of this. So, but what is important is considering that people actually are not living just on the private and personal sphere. So we have also social networks. We work in organizations. We can be like a public figures to some extent, also connecting with others that we don't know via social media, and we can influence, and we are influenced, but we can also influence our culture. So on the basis of that, this the sort of awareness should make us feel like more empowered, that we are not limited, we can do things. How, as a psychologist, we need to work with communities because each community can be quite specific about their needs, their resistance, and try to think about what are the barriers to sustainable behavior and what are the benefits of it, and also consider the other side of the coin in terms of unsustainable behavior. So if I'm working with a community about driving cars or riding bicycles, I need to take in account all of this, interview people, collecting data, trying to understand with them what I can work on that specific area and make a change. So to sum up, of course, like psychology can help under different on different levels, and so we can think about how we can mitigate climate change, or also start to think about adaptation. But individuals can have different roles in their communities, so we can work on that. We need to take a more an ecological model and also a global perspective. So we can't work just in Scotland, in Sweden, or also we are all interconnected, and we should work for this all together. And it's quite important also to work in an interdisciplinary way, because of course, as a psychologist, I can do something, but I'm sure that Alasdair and other colleagues, of course, can give their contribution to look at climate change in different ways. So we need all to work together towards this big challenge. Thank you so much.
And thank you very much indeed, Leyla, for that fantastic presentation and exploration of environmental psychology. That's been super